I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're taking a look at a captivating narrative. It's about the final month of the Lord Jesus Christ on earth. It's an interview with the author, Fred Kuypers, about his amazing book, What a Finish, What a Start, The Month Jesus Met Man's Need. It offers a unique hour-by-hour account of Jesus's journey through the month, revealing insights that challenge traditional views. Join us right now as we explore this fascinating chronicle that brings the Gospels to life in an unprecedented way. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. Fred, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very much. It's a joy to be here.
Joy to have you on the show. What made you so interested about the last month of Jesus?
Well, what made me very interested in it was I had devoted my life to Jesus Christ. I got this literally saved on December the 7th of 1980. And I was brought up trying to read the Bible, but it was never really open to me. And so I was depending on the traditions of the church and of my family to tell me the truths and the things that the scriptures had to say. Lo and behold, when I got saved, and I believe God steered me directly into a Bible, I found out that a lot of things that I was taught and was instructed by churches and other people in my own family, that just weren't true. And I said, you know what? There's got to be a level ground here. And, I believe God put his words in writing so that it's established, and it really is not going to be changed. A lot of people say, well, it was still man who put it down, but God ordained that he would protect his book. This is what makes us very adamant that the Bible is accurate for today. He said, I will preserve my words. Well, either God's telling the truth or he isn't telling the truth. So we have his preserved word, I believe, because he said he would preserve it. And in it, I start to find things that just aren't true. Um, a real example is I was born on December the 8th, is my birthday. It is the exact same day as a Feast of the Immaculate Conception. All my life, I grew up thinking that it was the Immaculate Conception of Jesus. And I later learned in life that it wasn't, that it was a church tradition of the Immaculate Conception of Mary. And I had been taught wrong for 30 years on my own. It was personal because it was my birthday.
Yeah.
So I looked at that and I said, there's got to be, how many other things are there that we haven't been taught correctly or right? And my book is primarily centered and focused around the crucifixion timeline of Jesus Christ. And I believe because of a lack of Old Testament understanding, I love our Jewish counterparts. The problem with a Jew is that they haven't accepted Jesus as their Messiah. We have, Christians have accepted. And we go back to the same writings, the Old Testament and the New Testament. But God never threw away the Old Testament. That's why we still have it in our Bible. So the issue is what are the rules and regulations that God set up in the Old Testament that we can use to view what took place in the New Testament? And one of them, of course, is the Sabbath. The Sabbath is a highly controversial time, highly controversial day. And it's hard to understand if you don't study the Old Testament. And that really is what the crucifixion timeline boils down to.
Let me ask you this. When you were doing your research, was there anything that really surprised you or a revelation that you made that you weren't expecting to find?
Oh, I had many, many. In talking about my book, since we're discussing that, the biggest one was I've always said, how could Jesus die on a Friday, be in the grave 3 days and 3 nights, and rise Sunday morning before anybody ever got to the tomb? Now that's very crystal clear in the Bible that Mary was the first one to the tomb, and it was still dark. on Sunday, on the first day of the week, the Bible says, which of course, we call Sunday. If you go 3 days and 3 nights from that, how do you get to a Friday crucifixion? And now there's a lot of people in the world that follow that. And the main reason, the big reason, is because everybody knows that Jesus was taken down off the cross before the Sabbath. And the Sabbath is always a Saturday. Okay. However, if you study the Old Testament and you realize the Jewish feast days, they have many other days that are Sabbaths, high Sabbaths, right after the Passover date, which is Nisan the 14th. That's another thing. If you understand the Old Testament, you would go to Exodus chapter 12, and you would understand that the sacrificial lamb that God used to protect all the children of Israel was killed on the 14th of the first month of the year. Crystal clear. Well, when Jesus came, he came to fulfill the law. And it's very clear that he died on the 14th of Nisan, just like the sacrificial lamb was. The next day after that, the 15th of Nisan, and then there's another problem with the name Nisan, which we can talk about in a minute. But the 15th of Nisan is a high Sabbath. So they have to get Jesus down off the cross before the Sabbath. If you study the scriptures, was it a high Sabbath or a regular Saturday Sabbath? John the Apostle calls it a high Sabbath. If you do the research, you start to find out, could there have been two Sabbaths that week? And of course, there was. There was, if Jesus was crucified and you need 3 days and 3 nights, my book, it says right on the cover that I contend that it was a Wednesday crucifixion. That is an eye opener for
Yeah.
everybody who hears it. That's a real eye opener.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, that's how you get three 24-hour days. If he was crucified on a Wednesday, it would have been at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They got him off the cross before the high Sabbath, which would be start Wednesday night at 6. That would be the start of the high Sabbath. And you go 3 days forward from that. Wednesday night at 6 to Thursday is 1 day. Thursday to Friday is 2 days. Friday to Saturday night is now 3 days. And anytime after 6 p.m. on Saturday, that's when the Sabbath ends. Jesus could have risen from the grave.
Mm.
We do not know the exact moment of his resurrection. He could have risen at 6:30 on Saturday night. It would still be the first day of the week. He could have risen at midnight. It would still be the first. He could have risen at 4:30. All we know is the grave was empty. When Mary Magdalene got there, it was empty, and that was while it was still dark. The proof that we have to take by faith as a Christian, the only proof we have is the empty tomb of Jesus. And by faith, we believe he rose from the dead. And the Bible calls him our first fruits. And so I studied that and I said, why are we being taught by over 2 billion people in the world believe it was a Friday? And I wonder how many of them have truly sat down and been able to research the scriptures the way I've tried to just explain it very simply. It goes way deeper than that, but very
Absolutely. No,
simply,
you've
I've
given us
tried to explain that.
a great overview of obviously very significant dates to Christians around the world and others. Before we leave you today, you had mentioned the month of Nisan is kind of confused. Tell us a little bit
Yes,
about that.
yes. Okay. In the book of Exodus, Moses established the first month of the year, and God showed it to him by saying that he has to sacrifice a lamb and put it on the doorposts in Egypt, so that when the death angel passed over, one of the plagues that God sent to the Egyptians was to kill the firstborn of every animal and person. But the only way he would not do that to a Israelite would be to, if they kill the lamb, and it gives the specific time and date and everything that they have to kill the lamb, and they have to take the blood and put it on the doorpost. And William Tyndale, who put the Bible into the English language, that's another story. he coined the phrase Passover, because the death angel would now pass over any family that had the blood applied to the doorpost. That was in the month Abib, or Aviv, A-V-I-V, or A-B-I-B, you would read in the book of Exodus. However, throughout the history of the Jews, they get to the time of their Babylonian captivity, which again is in the Old Testament. You have to really study the Babylonian captivity to understand it. And during that time, two of the books in the Bible had the name changed to the Babylonian name of the first month of the year, which is Nisan. So Esther talks about the first month of the year and calls it Nisan. And Nehemiah talks about the first month of the year and calls it Nisan. And from that point on, even the Jews today call the first month of their year Nisan. So that's a very, if you know the Old Testament, you'd say, really, it's Abib. Abib is the first month of the year. Right. But the name has been changed over the course of time and accepted by the Jewish people. So I had a hard time naming the book and calling it the month of Nisan. I almost call it the month of Abib.
That's amazing.
Because of the truths that are in the Old Testament.
It's amazing what you have uncovered during your research. I think it's interesting on so many levels, from a theological level, from a Christian level, from a historical level. Fred Kuypers' book is just outstanding. It is called What a Finish, What a Start, The Month Jesus Met Man's Need. It is an amazing book, very, very well researched, very detailed, and extremely well written. Fred, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you so much for having me.
Well, I appreciate your time and your insight. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time, this time until next time on Spotlight.